Let's talk, I guess, about the United States. I would like to know your thoughts on how you see the situation, what is happening there. I'll mention The Hill, which says that Trump has overtaken Harris for the first time in an election poll, and the intrigue remains. There are a lot of videos in the same TikTok where they go around asking people, saying Kamala, and people are answering them with Trump. There are a lot of such manipulations, and frankly, it's not very clear who is coming out on top. How do you see this whole story? The race is in full swing. You don't have to be a great Americanist to follow American politics very closely. But when you are there from time to time, when you open American news or translated materials, you can see that the apogee is really almost here. Today, there was video footage of Donald Trump serving customers at McDonald's on the McDrive. And there was a lot of surprise. Wow, Donald, he's frying potatoes there. So really different techniques are used. Those who work with TikTok, those who work with Instagram, everyone is trying to reach candidates from different segments of the population. Nobody knows who will win. I'll remind you of the example when there was a competition between Donald Trump and Mrs. Clinton in the previous period. She was ahead of him by a few percent, but in the end, she lost. So no one knows how the fate of these swing states will turn out. Swing states are really in the race. I think we will see a lot more different materials, including from the Russian Federation, indirectly from the Russian Federation, in support of Donald Trump and against Kamala Harris. Perhaps there will be some compromising data. We know that at this time, as well as in previous periods, the Russians prepared hundreds of different videos in support of Donald Trump. They were designed for different segments of the population: those who support the LGBT community, those who do not, those who support abortion, and those who do not, and the issue of firearms. In other words, various manipulative stories were created with one goal in mind: to make their candidate win. What are your internal feelings about who will win, and what should Ukraine prepare for? Let's just say that I understand that this question cannot be asked seriously, because this is the trend, everything is changing rapidly. But just based on my inner feelings and intuition, I have this cautious feeling. Once again, we have either a lady or a gentleman. It seems to me that the gentleman can win again. I'm just guessing. No one knows how fortune will swing, but indeed fortune has a place here in such elections, in the electoral race. And I'll say it again. The way candidates behave at the campaign stage and then the way they behave once in office are always three different candidates. Each of them is trying to please certain segments of the population. We know, for example, with Mr. Trump, that if he is in a community that supports LGBT people, he says, that's right, that's cool. If he is in a community that does not support abortion, he says, I'm against abortion. If the community is neutral about abortion, he neutrally mentions this topic, and if it is in favor, he supports it. That is, he tries to mimic the environment, the situation. But what is really in his head, what thoughts, what vision, what strategy, I think only he knows. Even his entourage is not fully informed. If he does win, I'm going to bring you to Mr. Austin's words, who said that he is returning to Ukraine for the fourth time as Secretary of Defense, demonstrating that the United States continues to support Ukraine. Today, a support package was also announced, and all of this seems to come under the sauce that if Mr. Trump wins, we are safe. But this does not sound serious in the context of long-term issues.
Але це, не лунає, так би мовити, серйозно в контексті довготривалих питань.
What is the thing about the United States? No matter who changes there, no matter what president comes in, Democrat or Republican, I realize that many of your viewers have already forgotten that we ever had elections. And every time one candidate comes in to replace another, the entire vertical changes immediately. People from different regions come to Kyiv, are appointed, the previous government is purged, some criminal proceedings are initiated. Then that president leaves, the new president brings his team, the previous ones are removed, they are all called predecessors and so on. In the United States, there is a kind of deep state. When governments change, ministers change, but the mechanism remains unchanged inside. And perhaps this implies the assumption that no matter who the president is, Mr. or Mrs. President, the policy toward Ukraine will not change. This is the policy of the United States, and you can't swing it and turn it around as you want. It seems that he is not entirely sure how this election will end and where the United States will go in general. Again, referring to Trump's words, I understand that he cannot be taken seriously. But he also said about his communication with Putin, how he threatened him if Putin dared. You talk about this deep state, that the United States is quite firmly based on its foundations and is building some actions in accordance with these foundations. But again, from the Democrats who say, let's get along, to Trump saying, I will destroy your bells with missiles. The amplitude is quite large. I'll tell you even more. At one time, Donald Trump tried to make friends with Kim Jong-un. He is, without exaggeration, well documented in John Bolton's memoirs, where he describes Trump's admiration for Kim Jong-un. When Emissar delivered a personal message from Kim, praising Trump as a wise leader, Trump showed the letter to people for days, highlighting the respect he believed he had earned.
Написано про те, що як я вас поважаю, ви такий мудрий лідер, і Дональд Трамп там декілька днів ходив або тижнів цим листом показував. Бачите, як мене поважають? Дивіться, вони так поважають, мене так.
You have to make friends with him. So this is to understand who Donald Trump is. He's a very emotional person, and this book describes a moment like this. If something was agreed upon in the evening at some high-level meeting with 4-star generals, ministers, national security advisors, with Donald Trump, it was quite normal for everything that was agreed upon during the 4-hour meeting yesterday to be canceled the next morning at 8 a.m. Just because Mr. Trump changed his mind, just like that. Why? Not because I changed my mind. So no one knows how Mr. Trump will behave, what his real thoughts are. But let me remind you once again of this classic example of Javelina. During his term, the first batch of weapons was transferred to Ukraine, which they were allowed to use, unlike under the Democrats. Additionally, after the 2018 poisoning of the Skripal family in Salisbury, around 150 Russian diplomats were expelled from diplomatic missions worldwide in response. Russian diplomats were sent home, with about 60 expelled personally by Donald Trump, who also closed the consulate in San Francisco. Thus, Donald Trump as a candidate and in office will likely present two different personas. When you said about your feelings about Trump and who will win, I want to clarify here. We are talking about a percentage range of 1 to 2%, not 5-10. Am I understanding this correctly? Yes. Yes, absolutely. Once again, this is my gut feeling. I don't have any insight. I didn't get a call from the State Department saying, Ivan, here's 100% information. Tell Donald Trump. Personally, my feeling is that he works more in the way his candidates like. He does seemingly very funny things. But I see how people work, how they react, and they like it when you're a person, a billionaire, who has 9 or 7 billion US dollars, as he noted, is doing a simple job like ordinary Americans. He gets on the same level as them. It seems to me that this will work, although once again, it is very funny, very frivolous, but simple and effective. You know, I noticed something when I watched him work. This work seems to calm him down. He immediately becomes calmer. I immediately thought, why does he need this politics? If he worked with people, he would help them like that. Remember those videos on Twitter, now X, showing Donald Trump getting off his plane and waving to a crowd? Americans claim there's no one there, but the shots are staged to make it look like he's greeting someone with his signature fist pump and sharp look.
Люди американські кажуть, так там немає натовпу. Він прилітає, він сам, нікого немає. Але для кадру показати, що він когось привітав, там кулак показав, такий гострий погляд. Він це дійсно робить, я не кажу там акторська.
He puts on a show, much like Hollywood, flashy and dramatic, though not always convincing. Importantly, no one targets McDonald's employees. People have forgotten about the shooting incident involving him, despite its seriousness. It may come up again in the final week, but he continues to play his role effectively.
Стріляли, кандидати вже забули все, але потім під час, можливо, останнього тижня буде згадка, як і намагалися вбити його, і свою роботу, на жаль, робить.
This is, once again, my personal attitude. Elon Musk, if he used to be the idol of many of my friends, they used to say, look, Elon Musk, he's just a star. But what has he turned into? Those jumps he made. Well, once again, we're just commenting on American politics, so don't take offense. I know how many people in our politics say, what do you understand, people? It's a great nation. Yes, it's a great nation. We're just saying what their election tricks are. We also had candidates who were very bright, diverse, with such a powerful vocabulary that everyone remembers now but has forgotten a little bit. Our president has called a meeting of the National Security and Defense Council to demand a response from law enforcement regarding false disabilities issued by medical and social expert commissions, particularly involving prosecutors. It's good when people pay attention to this, when internal problems are discussed. Because sometimes, because they go unnoticed, I think these problems are very seriously eating away at us from the inside. Absolutely. Look, today I came across a small fragment where your colleague Mr. Portnikov says that his journalist asks about corruption, and he says that the war is more important now. Corruption is secondary. Whoever disagrees, let the Warsaw train go bye-bye. I disagree with him because, look, corruption is corrosive, and this is not a figure of speech. It is really corrosive when there is a demand for illegal services, and public figures, public officials satisfy this demand, earning huge amounts of money. I think this is absolutely wrong.
Я вважаю, що це абсолютно неправильно. Слухайте, 6 мільйонів американських доларів – це не найкрутіша область. Я перепрошую таке порівняння.
USD 6 million isn't a significant amount compared to other areas that could generate much more, potentially in a single quarter. We need more presidential meetings, as previous efforts haven't worked. For instance, after meetings about officials leaving Ukraine, many were placed on wanted lists, highlighting the inefficacy of these discussions.
Всі розуміють, як вони залишають. Всі розуміють, що це профанація. І такі засідання під егідою президента, вони не працюють. Повинна бути система. Якщо ми кажемо за...
Everyone knows how officials leave and that it's ineffective. A presidential meeting won't solve this. A proper system is needed. There's a significant issue with military personnel returning from war without limbs facing 36 obstacles to confirm their disability, while prosecutors with no such issues face no scrutiny.
Я вважаю, що повинна бути процедура щодо державних чиновників. Якщо інвалід, то в якій фазі, в якому
Public officials need a clear procedure for assessing disabilities, including their degree and phase. Those with disabilities should be removed from high-ranking positions and assigned to junior roles. A systematic approach is crucial, particularly for military personnel who return with severe injuries and receive only disability certificates without adequate compensation. By the way, Mr. Portnikov is a very interesting speaker. He is really interesting to listen to. But when I heard the part you mentioned, I was somewhat disappointed. On the one hand, I understood his point that this is an unspoken price. It is impossible to fight both war and corruption. But the way it was presented, the suitcase at Warsaw Station, I immediately remembered how the Putin regime was established in Russia. They said, if you don't like something in the ruling elite, leave the country. That is, don't change what's inside, but leave the country. Get over it, and these are very dangerous narratives. I was also thinking, do our soldiers who see this corruption also have a suitcase at Warsaw Station? Yes, absolutely right. Once again, I disagree. Corruption eats away at you. Once again, Ukrainska Pravda did an investigation, Mr. Kache did an investigation into what amounts of money remain on the accounts of intermediary companies abroad. Recently, some argued that it's normal for large percentages of funds to remain abroad, but we don't have an extra $150 billion to allow for 5 to 10% in commissions. This practice isn't right, and the situation needs to change. While not everything can be fixed at once, we should at least start moving in the right direction. Jailing the head of Khmelnytsky region is significant, but there have been investigations in Vinnytsia and other regions as well. If we examine all prosecutors in Ukraine with disabilities still in office, the number will likely be surprising. The situation for various uniformed personnel could also lead to unpleasant revelations.
То я впевнений, що ми будемо дуже сильно здивовані тієї кількості від загальної кількості прокурорів. А є ще там різні люди в погонах, яка в них ситуація, це...
I would like to return to Mr. Austin's statement, to that aid, or rather, even to Mr. Repka's statement, who says that all this aid is great, but it is not a turning point. It will not change the course of the fighting. The Russians will continue to put pressure and continue to capture. His statement was quite radical. I understand that he is hinting at more decisive steps, which unfortunately we will not see at the moment. This includes F-16 aircraft and authorization to strike deep into Russian territory. Perhaps the elections in the United States will move all this forward. Well, I suppose that maybe they will. Do you remember about 6 months ago we were trying to decide whether, just before the U.S. elections, Biden would do something to support himself? We didn't know that he could resign from his post, and he would make such a decision so that Ukraine would win in a short time. This could have been sold to an internal observer, saying, you see, our strong help, our strong support was able to stop Russian aggression. Unfortunately, this did not happen. There is indeed still a certain desire at the level to let it work. For example, after November 5th, when the elections will be held. Regardless of who wins, Biden has 2.5 months left in office, during which he may decide to transfer missiles and permits to Ukraine without moral restraints. He might say, fire, give everything to Ukraine. There's still hope for this outcome.
Передати Україні ракети і дозволи, і вже знаєте, як людина, яка там за 2 тижні вже звільняється, і ніщо його там не може ані переслідувати, ані стримувати, жодних якихось моральних там запобіжників немає. Він каже: "Огонь, передавайте все Україні."
Perhaps it will be then, but there is still hope. I say this again. I remain optimistic. For 2 months now, there has been a discussion and debate about whether or not to give Ukraine this permit. The other side seems to be refusing to give it, and there is no positive and no outright negative. They keep discussing, communicating, and weighing up. I would like to see decisive steps, but once again, like the leaders, like the times. Thank you for your time and for the analytical conversation. I wish you a good evening. Goodbye. Ivan Stupak, a former employee of the Security Service of Ukraine, joined us on the air.